Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Madhu Andela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. And today is Wednesday, July the 8th, 2020. And we have a dynamic program for you today. I'm very excited to have our special guest. We have started an initiative a few years back, and to advertise, to promote, to also encourage more young people to get into the sciences. So in terms of promoting and in Black scientists, and we even went as far as to create Black Science Month, and which is October. And so it's been in existence for about 5 years now. And we're working on the web page now, but we do have the Facebook page for that. I want to welcome everyone who is listening live, and of course, all of you who are catching us on the archive. And let me do a test right there. We go. Today's topic is going to be on reverse engineering. And as a computer scientist myself, I'm always interested in working backwards and in reconstructing things. This is probably also why I'm into historical comparative linguistics, in terms of reconstructing, history and the culture and the psychology of a people's in times past, working backwards, and reconstructing some things and trying to see what the outline is, and putting it back together, and this is essentially, on the technology side, what our focus is going to be today. And so as a result of, that interest in science and the process of reverse engineering, we have invited a special guest, Dr. Kevin T. Kornegay, who is a engineer and computer scientist, who is with the, the director of the Center for the Reverse Engineering and Assured Microelectronics, and the IoT Security Professor and Director of the Cybersecurity Assurance. And, oh, it just stopped on me. I'm sorry. Here we go. The Director of the Cybersecurity Assurance and Policy Center at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. And so before we bring him on, as always, I like to shout out everyone who is listening live, especially those who are in the chat room and like to make themselves known. So peace and blessings to Infinite Minds, to Sister Tamika, to Jagad Davis, to Lil Sister, and Philly Chew 215. In the Facebook chat, we have Brother Yakro Yao, Etri 1010. He changes his name all the time, so he's out of the UK. Zen Ra Shu, Brother Jean-Claude Mboli, Jaha H. Thank you for joining the chat at the moment and making yourselves known. So I appreciate the support. Please like and share and get some more people in here to catch this live broadcast. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest. Unmute your mic. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hello, how you doing, sir?
I am wonderful, and I feel honored for this opportunity to share the knowledge that we have at Morgan State in respect to reverse engineering. One of the things that you've given a thank you for the nice segue. Reverse engineering is working backwards. And it's kind of funny, as a child, one of the things, skills that, and I didn't realize I was developing was I tinkered a lot. I always was messing around with toys, trying to figure out how things work. And it's no surprise that the motivation kind of is what stirs me up today and plays a big part in my career as well. So it's exciting, and so why don't we get right into it? But before I begin my presentation, which is kind of a hodgepodge, it's going to be high level, and I really like to engage my audience. So please feel free to ask questions. I will prompt for questions. So I'd like this to be interactive. So to begin, what is reverse engineering? It's really just a process of trying to figure out how something, a black box or some device, or like a cell phone or a computer or what have you, and you don't know what its function is, but you want to know what's inside, how it works, and you're trying to figure it out. So you don't have access to drawings or data sheets or any information about this black box. So how do you go about figuring out its function, what it does, and so forth? But so I mentioned one of the reasons why you want to do reverse engineering. Why is it? Can someone tell me why? Give me another reason why someone would do reverse engineering.
All right. Just to keep in mind that when we are live, it's going to be a slight delay of winning it, so it won't be an immediate response. So he's asking, what other reasons would we use to reverse engineer something? And it kind of reminds me of, I wish I had the citation. And so I'm in Texas right now, but all my material is back home in Philadelphia. And the early Africans, like during the colonial period, in Southern Africa, they got a hold of rifles and weapons, and they reverse engineered the guns and also reverse engineered the bullets and the powders and stuff inside, and actually created weapons from there. And so when the colonial powers in South Africa got wind of this, they hurried up and got dismantled, saying that process.
Yes, that's a very interesting analogy because
Yeah.
reverse engineering is used to counterfeit. So
Mhm.
counterfeiters use it, reverse engineering to duplicate a cell phone. That's why you see a lot of knockoffs in the market today, whether it's electronics, software. So reverse engineering uh, really applies to both the software and hardware. So copywriting, etc. So anything in a digital format
Mhm.
and data can be uh, manipulated. So people, uh, uh, you can do reverse engineering for their own personal means, or if they want to um, disrupt, they want to destroy, they want to just eavesdrop. So, for example, which is a Chinese company,
Mhm.
networking company. So they make these network appliances, boxes, that go into data centers and so forth, and sold widely across the U.S. And so what they do, they put inside, uh, normally inside their chips, but on the chips they put additional circuits on the chips so that they can eavesdrop without
Mhm.
physically being there. So this is how they've been able to steal a lot of trade secrets.
Mhm.
Um, and so, in order to counteract that, you have to use reverse engineering techniques to locate that's
Mhm.
the device that has the spy circuitry on it, so that you can you can disable it. Another countermeasure would be not to buy it. But
Mhm.
today, the U.S. government has um, doesn't buy their products anymore because of that. And so that there's this big push because of going overseas in the markets and profit margins. A lot of high tech industry has gone overseas,
Mhm.
and um, so we've lost a lot of that manufacturing here in the states. And because what that posed is this reliance on technology, semiconductor technology in particular, that's manufactured offshore, and that
Mhm.
opens us up to these types of attacks. And these are cyber attacks when
Mhm.
someone intentionally inserts malicious circuits and software that's intended to retrieve and steal information and data. So there's a big push by the government now to restore some of that to manufacturing here in the states, and to have sort of and it's interesting, the entire semiconductor or electronic supply chain. So a lot of our military systems
Mhm.
are built using a lot of commercial off-the-shelf components, which are manufactured, some of which are manufactured overseas, and even the software that runs on the hardware is also written overseas. So,
Mhm.
and these things have what they call Trojan horses from the
Yeah.
old Roman. So you have Trojan software, you have Trojan hardware, and they go undetected because when they assemble these systems, they don't check for those things because
Mhm.
they don't have tools. So now there's a big push to develop tools. And that's kind of the space that we're in, and
Yeah.
we produce, and we are the only HPCU, and probably the one of the few universities that specializes in hardware security. So that's our space. We Our goal is to produce as many bachelor's, masters, and doctorate students with this unique skill, because there's um, the workforce, particularly in cyber, where there's so few of us, and there's tons of jobs that cannot be filled. So this is big mad rush to try and develop this workforce, and this is a tremendous opportunity for African Americans. So
Hold on, before you start on your presentation,
mhm.
I want you to kind of give us an outline of what now for individuals like me who grew up in the early 90s in hip hop culture, you
Mhm.
know, the acronym CREAM stands for, cash rules everything around me. But the Wu-Tang Clan in
Right,
terms of
right.
association. But uh but you have a different, you know, uh acronym for CREAM, in terms of your center. So can you tell us what that is and what the center is all about?
Okay.
Uh, so,
So CREAM, which stands for the Center for Reverse Engineering and Assured Microelectronics.
okay.
And what we do, we develop tools, methodologies, solutions, and highly skilled um, cybersecurity engineers to help prevent the penetration, manipulation, and of our nation's cyber physical infrastructures, such as the power grid, smart homes, uh, smart factories, smart buildings, um, uh, autonomous vehicles, you name it. A lot of the work, and we typically work in the IoT space. So the IoT stands for Internet of Things. That's the application, and with the advent of 5G technology coming on board, you're going to see this billions and billions of these IoT devices, and we can't live without them. They permeate every aspect of our daily lives. So, for example, you will interface with an IoT device, whether it's a cell phone, a car, uh, uh, um, at least 30 to 20 to 30 devices throughout your daily walk. So, and these devices, we're in this era of everything connected. So, what that does, it poses a tremendous threat vector and creates numerous opportunities for adversaries, hackers, to exploit and take advantage, especially in this COVID area where people are sitting at home on their computers and so forth. So so we want to prevent folks from, they can steal your credentials easily, even though it may be encrypt your credentials, may be stored on a smart card that's encrypted with, encrypted and stored in a trusted, and secured hardware on the chip. We know how. Uh, I'm here to tell you today, though, with the means and time, anything can be hacked. You just need the right kind of and hacking and basically reverse engineering, trying to figure out how something works, depends on two basic principles. The first is that in order to understand how something um, functions, you have to observe it. What are the ways to observe it? You listen to it, but the way we listen to electronic devices, we need instrumentation so that we can access and a way to access the inputs and outputs of the device so that we can listen once and observe the behavior. By observing the behavior, we can determine the function of the device. And that's what a hacker does. When they're sitting on the internet, someone who wants to hack into your, let's say, onto your network, they're going to monitor the traffic on your network, and they look for certain patterns, certain things that will indicate that, okay, they understand. And these folks are pretty sharp. They understand how the data is formatted, um, how the communications is established, and so forth. So they pick the right time to
Mhm.
capture and monitor your data. And once that information is in the clear, meaning that the there's plain text. So this, and I'm going to talk about this later. So data that is um, unencrypted is called plain text. Um, and it's mixed with ciphertext, which is sort of like a pseudocode, and to create, well, it's mixed with a key to create ciphertext. So, and the ciphertext is and this is typically in any kind of transmission of information, in any communication system, such as in the wireless communication, that link, meaning the establishment between your cell phone and the tower, the cell tower, that link is established across um, um, by way of authentication. So how does the tower know that the cell phone, you have a service? So your information is encrypted, and there's a header that's sent in the data frame, the packet, and in establishing when you first power up and connect to the cell tower. And that information, if you're traveling in a car, is passed along. It's called frequency hopping, but you are passed along as you're traveling along, from here to Atlanta, for example.
Mhm.
You don't lose coverage, so that's called frequency hopping. They just pass you on from tower to tower based on your carrier. But anyway,
And
so I'll talk about so today I'm going to talk about, in particular, and I'm going to start off with the following scenario.
okay, but before you do that, hold on. Before you do that, I just want to say thank you to Don Williams for your contribution to the channel. And I don't know if she's watching, but also to thank Dr. Maat for introducing me to our guest today. So shout out to Dr. Maat at Morgan State University. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to, he's going to do a presentation. So I'm going to bring up his shared screen. And again, this is an interactive conversation. So if you have a question or something needs to be made clear, just say so in the chat room, whether you're on Facebook or whether you are on YouTube, and we'll bring it to his attention. So just let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All righty.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm gonna start off with a scenario. So let's say you go to Walmart, you're looking for, or Best Buy, you're looking for to purchase a new router for your home. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that router, let's say, is $59, but you notice there's on another shelf there's a same router in an open box that was the same router, but it's been returned, I guess, and it's on sale for $29.99. So you probably say, "Oh, gee, this is just a router. I'll just save myself $30 and I'll just take it home and install it and so forth." Unbeknownst to you, though, that router, someone has taken it and they have reverse engineered it, inserted a new firmware. Okay, they've downloaded the firmware, modified it so that they can, and put some additional code so that allows them to gain access, unbeknownst to you. So they can monitor, they can retrieve. So they create a back door on your home system. And you don't know that's happened. So, and the only way you can tell whether or not you've been compromised is, well, of course, notice that your money's gone on you. But if you're someone like NASA, they had a situation where someone they have these Raspberry Pi kits. There's all kinds of little kits. The Raspberry Pis are these little microcontrollers, these little cards, printed circuit boards. There's cards, and these are things that you would find inside. If you were to open up your computer or your TV or the network box, you'd have some kind of board with there's some kind of controller, which is the brains of the chip, and that's usually what the attackers, the hardware attackers, that's usually what they modify. So today I'm going to talk about how a hacker, a tool we can use to retrieve information, and typically these boards are densely packed with lots of chips, and so it's very difficult to physically access it. So I mentioned earlier, you need a way to probe or access the inputs and outputs of the chips so that you can observe the device and to ascertain its behavior. So the industry's come up with a standard, an industry standard that's widely adopted called the Joint Test Access, developed by the and it's called JTAG, which is short for Joint Test Access Port, and it's basically a serial bus standard. So every board, when they develop it, the developer always leaves ports or back doors open, whether it's software or hardware, so that they can go in and debug. They can they can do firmware updates. And by the way, it's always good to update your firmware, your software, in your operating system or what have you on your phone, because the updates are there to take care of security flaws. So they won't tell you that there's been a breach or something, but it's usually a patch to fix or to plug a backdoor that someone discovered. Because these hackers are very intelligent. They know the hardware, they know the systems, and they know how things are implemented, and usually it's the flaws in the implementation and so forth that folks don't think about when they're designing and developing this hardware. So it's sort of a chicken and egg problem. So I'll be talking about the JTAG, the standard, how do we, the process of identifying where the ports are on the board, how do we access it, and the different types of debug interfaces and so forth. On-chip debug interfaces are well known. So there are a ton of standards, just like, for example, there's your Ethernet. If you have a router, or let's take your computer, for example. Your computer comes with a bunch of different ports. One for your display port. There's a printer port. There's a keyboard, mouse port, USB port. There's all kinds of ports. These are all interfaces that these are backdoors that a smart adversary can access to gain access to your system. Once they have access, the reason why they want to access your system, they might want to control your system, so that they can monitor, they can extract, modify, and so forth. So these are the reasons why someone would want to access your system. Okay, so your on-chip, debug interfaces. There's a JTAG port. There's a SPI port. There's a ton of different ports. to identify, sometimes you can see on the picture on the right, this is a board. Some of the boards, this is a board that's probably inside of a hard drive. So you can see this is probably your microcontroller chips. You probably have some other interface chips, but this board, you have devices on both sides, and you can see the pins, and they're hard to, nothing's identified. You don't know what's input, you don't know what's output, and sometimes they're even more densely packed than this, but it's difficult to access. So this gives you an idea as to what the challenges are, physical challenges.
Good
So,
question.
sure.
So if you have let's say you have a hard drive like you have on the left-hand side there,
Right.
and it is, let's say it crashed on you and it doesn't work regularly in the computer. So you took it out and replaced it. Can, even though I know this answer, but can someone still take that hard drive, even though it doesn't work normally, and still get information off?
Oh yes. Oh my goodness. I don't throw it. I don't throw anything out. I don't throw cell phones. So, for example, just because you do a factory reset does not mean that you have washed your device. So all of your personal information is still on the drive, in the memory on the device, whether it's and so unless you have the right kind of tools to purge software that it will to purge and scrub the drive, because it's always there. Even though you've erased it, there are ways and to sort of recreate the data, but you need very specialized equipment to do that. But yeah, you can retrieve anything, whether the drive is broken or not.
All right, appreciate it.
So, someone came up with a smart idea. They developed a tool called and there's several types of tools, but this is a cheap tool to access the JTAG port on the chip so that they can pull information off of it. They developed a nice GUI interface for it, and but they intended to make it easy, so all the hard work was done in trying to configure the device to control the tap interface. So, and this board allows you to do that. But the primary reason why they developed this board is to attract more non-hardware folks to hardware hacking. So, what an easy to use tool and so forth. So this is like a it's $20 kit you can buy. And by the way, for any one of you who are interested out there, there's a website called Hackle Boxes. Just do a search on the web. They have tons of nice little kits that kids can use to learn about hardware, embedded systems, the interaction between software and hardware. And they're cheap. They're about no more than $40 a kit, and they come out with a new kit every month. But they're cool. And but what's most important is that kids who use them will develop skills development. So that's the most important thing. So one of the key things you need to do is in order to interrogate a device, you need to identify the interfaces. How are you going to get at the device? And there's tons of, if you have to examine the device, and you can see on the left here, this is a mouse. You have in the middle, this is a key pod. And what's this on the right? I don't know what that's on the right. Some kind, but you can see this is usually the JTAG port, and that's a good indication that usually has four. The JTAG port has 4 key signals, and this will usually give you an indication that, oh, gee, this may be a JTAG port. So this allows the manufacturer, again, to functionally test the device to make sure it does its intended function before they ship it out. They box it up and ship it out. So this is after they packaged it and so forth. So this is that's another useful feature of JTAG. So it provides access from the outside world. Most often than not, it's usually hidden and protected, and underneath batteries or stickers. But usually, a clear indicator is that it's going to have 4 pins, and usually when you see that, that's a good indicator. Okay. So identifying them internally is a little more challenging. Once you take the board out of the package, you usually look for test points. Sometimes they're labeled. Manufacturers are a little clever these days. They stop labeling things, so you don't. Although you may see a pad, and that's a good indicator that, or test pins or test pads, such as here on the left or here on the right, and you notice look at all these chips, and it's hard to access, but you're really searching for this text access port called the TAP, this 4-pin port, text access TAP port, and you're looking for that, and you kind of just look for anywhere where you see some grouping of pads like this, okay? So whether it's test points or unpopulated pads, silk screen markings, just as so test TPs. That's a good guess would be that these are test points, and easy to access locations. So you kind of with experience, and you develop this knack over time just through experience. So you either must have some familiarity with the target device, but often than not, you'll see this is another example of a board with some test points that you can see. This is a little bit more complicated, but again, what you have to do is look for a test port, and that's the first place to start. So once you identify that, you can use a nice use. You're going to need tools, and one of your probably most important tools you're going to use is a digital voltmeter. And what you can do with that is identify the test points. So there was a question that popped up. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just kind of like labeling the steps. So you said to identify the test port.
Yes. So, and you can trace this. Another thing, you can trace this back to the chip. You can follow these traces on the board, but and then you can use a continuity test on. You can set your digital voltmeter, your DVM, to perform a continuity test, and so when you get the right tone, you know where that you can locate the actual trace all the way back to the board. Sometimes they use silk screening to cover some of these traces, so you won't even see the traces. And it depends. This board is a simple board. It has it's not a multi-layers, probably a few layers, two to three layers, but multi-layered boards are more challenging. Um, on the right, but traces of similar functions are grouped together. So you can have this may bring things out to a bus. So a bus is where you have a grouping, like it could be a data bus, and data bus is where you provide some very valuable insight into the memory on the boards. Okay. Another thing is to you can also look at the pull-ups and pull-downs. So you may see an array of resistors. So these are resistors up here. Okay. Those are used to pull up and pull down to set static states for on the pins. And the test points usually placed on important or interesting signals. So usually the test points are usually placed, you find them near very important signals. So sometimes these things, again, may be hidden by solder mask, and you see, as you can see here, and there are no traces. So to trace this back, so this is where your DVM, your digital voltmeter, comes in handy, where you can trace this. You put one pin here and the other pin, you just poll each pin on the chip package until you get a tone. Once you have a tone, you have that means a short. Okay, you have a short, which means you have a wire between those two pins. And that's how you can trace. Okay. So sometimes the identifying the interfaces, it can be more difficult to locate when available on you have these component pads. So notice you have these R's usually indicate resistors, and probably on the other side of the board. But notice these bottom 4 pins is the test port, and these are the 4 pins that, as defined by the standard TMS, is test mode select. You need a clock because you test data input, test data output. So the way it works is that test mode select puts configures the devices on the board that comply with the standard, configures all of them to be in serial shift mode, for example. So, and then you need a clock to clock the data through on the input. So you place your test data on the input, and you clock it through your devices and then you run after your data is set up at the inputs of all of the pins on the chip. Then you assert another clock. You run another clock, and then you scan it back out. So you scan in your data, run it once clock cycle, then you scan it out. So you can capture the state of the input that you've applied.
Can you explain briefly what do you mean when you say clock, for those who are not computer savvy?
Okay.
And,
so you have computer systems are classified in 1 of 2 types. So the first type, which is the vast majority of computer systems, they are, or systems in general, they're synchronous. And synchronous systems usually operate on a global signal called a clock signal. So all the operations of all the functional blocks on the chip are all synchronized and controlled by a single global signal called the clock signal, so that you can coordinate all the function operations on the chip. Okay, so a clock is just a global control signal. Okay.
All right.
Asynchronous, on the other hand, depends on a request acknowledge, a communications, a handshaking. So that is asynchronous. So for example, so you have on one side, you have a sender that sends a request, and then it waits. It doesn't release the channel or the data until it receives an acknowledged signal back from the receiver. So so it sends the data, the request gets the receiver gets a request. It goes off and does this thing. It processes that data, and when it's done processing, it'll assert a acknowledge, so that the sender can send the next set of data. So there's two types of systems. So test clock, the mode select allows you to configure the devices for a particular test mode, and then you have your input and your output. Okay.
Alrighty.
So to manually determine the pin function, you're gonna identify your test points. You trace connections with your voltmeter. For more devices where pins aren't accessible, you may have to remove the device, or in some instances, they use X-rays. Some you may get lucky. What you can do, typically, what you typically do, most of the chips, you try to identify the chips on the board that populate the board. You go on the web, search for the data sheet for those chips. Once you have the data sheets, you have all kinds of information about the device, what its clock rate is, what the pin configuration is. So it tells you exactly on the package type it is and what the pinout. So you know the pinout, and that makes your job a lot easier. So a lot of today, the printed circuit board manufacturers, in order to prevent counterfeiting, they obfuscate the pins, so they don't put anything out there. So you basically just have, you don't know any. They don't give you a data sheet. They'll permute the pins and so forth. So they make it more difficult. They just make it more difficult. Which means, and time is money. So the challenge is to try and identify and access and complete your tasks in the least amount of time. So you can probe the connections. So these are other tools. So you can have oscilloscopes and logic analyzers. These are now cheap. Before, they used to be workbench boxes. Now you can get them in, they're USB based. They're small. You can get them in a small form factor, and they're inexpensive. So oscilloscopes, logic analyzers. You can. The other thing is to interrogate the device, you can just have a companion. You just start pulling pins high and low so you can observe the results. So if you're trying to figure out the behavior, you can start to exercise the device. So by pulling pins high or low. So that means you either have a switch with some, a little board with some switches, that are tied to the supply lines, and to so that you can apply a logic level 1 or 0, and that's based on the supply voltages that are on the board. Okay, so to manually determine the pin function, you have to you may have to remove the board, and you may have to put places in the oven to loosen up some of the solder. So this is what they call a ball grid array. This is a high density chip. This has a lot of, they go to this particular style because this chip has a lot of inputs and outputs. So they want high density IO. They use this particular form. They use ball grid arrays, and this is virtually impossible to probe probe this with the voltmeter. So,
quick question.
Sure.
I see on the picture that the individual has his hand uncovered. Is it best to try to do this, with like some kind of gloves or something, as not to get any kind of oils on the to touch, or would it be okay?
It's okay. It's okay. Typically, what's most important when you're working with printed circuit boards is to be grounded. So you have a ground mat, so that, because these devices are very sensitive to electrostatic discharge. So, and we have wool hair. No, but so, but in all seriousness, electrostatic discharge will destroy these chips. It's like in a lightning bolt. The charge is much, that lightning bolt charge. It's like hitting the chip with a lightning bolt, and that will virtually destroy. Because even though the chips, and most chips do have what they call electrostatic discharge protection circuitry, where they basically on the power supply lines. So usually, and on the input lines and the output lines, they usually have these these pull-up diodes, these clamping diodes that actually clamp, and their job is to make sure that the voltage on that pin doesn't exceed diode drop above the supply voltage. So let's say your supply voltage is 5 volts. Okay, and the clamping diode is 0.7 volts. So the maximum it'll clamp the maximum voltage that line can see is going to be 5.7 volts. So anything above that, it'll clamp it. So to protect the circuit. But if you're above, the problem arises when you exceed the voltage capacity of the diode due to the large electrostatic charge. Okay. So I'm going to skip that. So this is what's on the JTAGulator, the test board. Typically, at the heart of it is a microcontroller unit, MCU. This is the brains of the device. So this implements the test protocols and allows you to control, and this interprets the commands, the user commands from the PC, and controls the test board. So, but anyway, it has some DDAs, and which the DDA is there to convert the digital signals to analog signals. These are for voltage level shifters that convert between different voltage levels. You have some input protection circuitry. That's what I was just talking about. The power switch, which controls the power on levels on the board. So this is simple. This is what's on the board. This is your microcontroller. This is your level translation stuff, input protection of these. These are diodes that I was talking about. You have 24 channels of test ports. What else? USB interface so that you can power it, connect it to your. This is a micro USB connector so that you can connect this to your PC, and you run it software on there and so forth. So Teague Evans, to destroy data information in cell phone or computer, is a static charge that you that can be used. Is this?
If you can rewrite your question so it'll be a bit more clear. I don't.
So, yeah, can you rephrase your question?
Tig Evans, rephrase your question,
So,
and I'll put it back up there so he can answer. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So I see we have I have about 4 minutes remaining. So I'm just gonna step through it. In terms of things that you will need. So this is this is oscilloscope, voltmeter, digital voltmeter. This is a digital. This is a power supply, so that you can apply voltages to your device under test or your DUT. You need an oven. You can use the oven to loosen up if you have ball grid array devices or chips on your board. You can use this to loosen them up. And this is pretty inexpensive. But notice I mentioned this blue pad. This is an electrostatic discharge pad, and usually there's a connector to it that's tied to goes to ground. So these are all typical tools you'll find in the hardware hacker. They will have a soldering iron. This is all their stuff, so they can remove devices and so forth. But this is a typical setup. You need some sort of PC, your JTAGulator, which I don't see here, but in the picture. But that's a very nice scope. That's an expensive scope, maybe about 3 to 4K. So, anyways, Propeller. This is the core of this is the microcontroller. It's 8-bit, 32. Is 8 parallel 32-bit microcontroller or processor, and the software is written in C. C is a C or assembly code. Assembly code is not taught much, so one of the if you're going to play around with firmware, you're going to also need tools, hex tools, and executable readers, different types of tools, so that you can download the executable or download the firmware so that you can manipulate this. So you can actually pull out the firmware using the JTAG. So accessing the device to configure it, so one way you can do this is once you access it, the JTAG port, you can control the device. So you can put it in test mode, or you can configure it, or you can put it in update mode. There are a number of things you can do to do that. But anyways, that's kind of this is the interface, level translation. So this kind of goes through all of the describes all of the different functional blocks on the chip. So anyway, JTAG is an industry standard if you want to learn more about it, but you can, there's tons of information on the on the web. Let's see. Yeah, so a little bit. So I mentioned these are 4 critical control pins for the test access port. So it's a synchronous serial interface called the TAP. You have the instructions so you can put it in these are the different types of modes. You have bypass data, different types of data. So anyways, different instructions for the standard bypass, sample, external test. So you can run built-in self-tests. There's lots of things you can do. Initiate from you can place the inputs in the high impedance state so that they don't recognize any input or output. So the device, you can do that such that the device appears as if it's not working, but there's nothing wrong with the device. So you can it's sort of like it's analogous to spoofing, So you kind of fake, like something's wrong when really it's just in a high impedance state. But the user doesn't know it's in a high impedance state. So in other words, when it's in a high impedance state, it's like the chip, the processor, which is the brains, is not going to respond to any input. Okay, so the device is like dead. It appears like it's dead, but it's not. It's just in a sleep state, but the user doesn't know it. So, an adversary could do something like that very, very easily if they had control of the. But the JTAG attacks are kind of require that you have physical access to the device. Anyways, that's all I have to talk about this evening. But if there are questions.
Yes, we have one question from JCAC.
Yeah, what would it take to manufacture microprocessor? Oh boy, this is one of the reasons why it's done overseas. Semiconductor manufacturing is so to give you an idea, so you have a foundry. These foundries are typically located in low vibration areas. So if you can think about, there's the fundamental building block of a chip is a transistor, and the smaller, the more transistors they can put on a chip means that we're benefiting from it, because you look at our cell phones, you got more functionality. You can do all kinds of things. We're doing video and all this stuff on our cell phones. That's because you have chips inside the cell phone have billions of transistors. But to manufacture those billions of transistors reliably, it's very expensive. So you have semiconductor manufacturing plants. They're based usually in areas where there's low vibration, out in Arizona and New Mexico. So Intel has where Intel, for example, has some of their fabrication foundries, and they run 24/7 because the cost. So you can think about the transistor. Today's transistors are on a scale. The smallest one they can make is, I think, it's 7 nanometers. That's 7 times 10 to the minus 9 meters. It's very, very small. So, and imagine a particulate like a strand of hair, which is probably 1,000 times bigger, gets into the fabrication process. It can destroy the whole chip because it's so. The air handling systems are very, very expensive. The chemicals, but the base material is sand. It begins with sand, from which they develop silicon, and then the whole process of building these transistors and the interconnect, the metallization they use, and the passivation for the dielectrics they use for the passivation. So it's built, chips are built in this layer by layer process, but it's very expensive. So to run these foundries, to run 24 hours a day, they run 3 shifts through them, and they have it's just a major operation. So
this wouldn't be something that you're in the basement, manufacturing from scratch.
No, however, they do have what do they call? You can print circuits on paper. So there have been folks trying to do that, but you can't on paper. You can print circuits on paper, but you can't build a whole chip. You can build simple things. So that's why they're integrating intelligence into materials and clothing. So you'll be a wearable computer, but they won't have the same kind of functionality as you would find in your cell phone, because they won't have the density or the power and so forth. So more transistors, you can lower the power, so that this is why you see this proliferation of mobile devices. So, because of that. So
could we couldn't even recycle? Like,
no.
It's not theoretically possible to kind of make like a board, like a large board, and recycle from old computers, and make like a super chip or something to that nature.
No, because chips, the clock rates, because of the scale, of the economy of scale, enable them to clock chips. So we follow Moore's law. Chips follows Moore's law. According to Moore's law, every 2 years, the clock rates double.
Yeah.
The chip sizes double. And for the past, since the 1970s, early 70s, since the first integrated circuit or chip, we've transcended we've ascended this Moore's law. We followed this, and and again, if you can you see in your computer, you can fit 8 processors today, where you can fit in one processor footprint back in 1980. So with 8 processors working together, you can do a lot more things, right?
Yeah.
So and while not expending as much battery power, so you can run your computers much longer today than you could, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. So yeah.
And this is the last question. Mr. Evans kind of reworded what he said earlier. So is there an electrical charge we can use to destroy data information on the cell phone or computer that an everyday normal person can use?
Oh, that's excellent question. He has a hacker's mind. But once you zap the phone, you won't be able to use it anymore.
Yeah.
Get rid of the, you can zap the phone, and they won't be able to use it anymore. So
that would be the equivalent to like running a magnet, over.
Well, what the magnet does, it affects the memory, because memories are stored as zeros and ones, and particularly in dynamic memory. So you run a magnet over it, you can change the polarity of the data that's stored in the memory. So it's not good to have magnets. So this is why they have shielding, and it's not good to have your magnetic strips near your RF, near your cell phones, Not good to have your cards, your smart cards near your cell phone,
Mm.
because you'll wipe your cards clean. You'll wipe your card clean. So because cell phones, the RF signal is electromagnetic. So so is the data, your information that's stored on the magnetic strip is also magnetic, electromagnetic. So you can erase that, easily erase the information and destroy your card. Yeah.
I hope the audience is kind of getting a feel for the type of knowledge that you would have to, kind of have and keep in mind when you're talking about at least reverse engineering, electrical components
Yes.
and things of that nature. So
It's
um,
that's a
it's very involved.
yes, because it's different than reverse engineering code
Yeah.
or software. Software reverse engineering is very different. You're sorting through code, um, but the, the most challenging thing is taking a black box. So let's
Hmm.
say this is what NSA does. So let's say they have in their possession they have this box,
Hmm.
and but if they pop it open, it has countermeasures. So the moment, like in the Mission Impossible,
Yeah.
this plate will self-destruct. I mean, there are devices and there are people or nation states that will go to great lengths to protect the data or information that's stored inside of that device. So
Hmm.
they would, so to, they will have X-ray. They will have devices that will detect X-ray, and once they detect, boom, they'll blow up, kind of blow up the analogous to blowing up the device. They'll destroy the device,
Yeah.
uh, deploy a high charge or release some corrosive chemicals that will destroy the actual device. If you want to interrogate it with the RF, so with some kind of radio signal, um, or even light, if you want to use laser to scan over the top of the device um,
Hmm.
to inject voltages and so forth. You can That's called fault injection. So there's two types of ways to control it. So there's side channel. So every device is side channel analysis. So every device leaks information through side channels. Side channels are unintended channels. So like a keyboard is one example. So the sound it makes. So based on the sound it makes, you can reverse engineer that and
Hmm.
expect I could learn your password based on that, or the electromagnetic radiation that comes off of the keyboard. Again, I can, so I just need the right kind of receiver to listen to that, and then filter out the noise, zoom in on your keystrokes, and know when you input your enter key. So and backtrack from that, I know where your password. Um, and this is without having to go through encryption. This is before encryption, decryption. So that's what I mean by things in the clear, and that's before it gets encrypted,
Hmm.
before it becomes ciphertext. You know, I can I can retrieve the information. I can also reverse engineer encryption. So
Hmm.
typically, for example, when your device is running encryption, while it's running its encryption program, I can uh, I can listen in, acquire the data, and I can sort of brute force figure out what the encryption key. Once I have the encryption key, I can go in. I can listen in on all your messages.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And,
anyways,
and this will be my question. Um, and we can end on this. Uh, for those of us who aren't into computer science as a career.
Mhm.
In your opinion, is it still a good idea to try to study some basics of computer science and code and cybersecurity?
Yeah.
And what would be the benefit for a layperson to get involved in that, even if they're not per se pursuing a career, in it, like a business owner, or, just even a community activist, who wants to keep certain things secure, or whatnot. Like, why should we have this knowledge, even if we're not pursuing a career, in computer science, electrical engineering, or whatnot?
Well, that's so you don't get got. No, really. Right, because being aware is the name of the game, and if you know about how folks um, can attack you, because cybersecurity is so important today because it reaches us at home, because it's on these personal devices, so it's personal. So if the more you're aware of how they can, then you can take the necessary precautions and practice best practice and utilize best practices and things. Because the average person um, just, doesn't know just simple things like changing your password, right? Don't use common passwords like Fido. You want they have to be like at least 12 characters. You have to use a mixture of characters, alphanumeric and non-alphanumeric, um, uppercase and lowercase. So you have to mix things. Don't use just common thing. Don't use your birth date or your kid's name and so forth. So because those are and also too, when you buy your routers and so forth, and you get it home, change the password from the root password. Simple things like that. So being informed and aware will help. You know, at least give you some peace of mind.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I appreciate it greatly. You stepping in and getting us started on this journey of learning how to reverse engineer and put it in our minds. Um, some things to consider, especially in this new age, where we're getting more personal, and we're putting a lot of our personal information on this world wide web, and to try to keep ourselves safe. Go ahead. You want to say something?
Yeah, because there's lots of stuff on how to hack this, how to hack that on the web. So if you want to learn how to hack something, there are tools, there are virtual machines with bundles that give you all the hacker tools. So you can wreak havoc on your. So, do you recommend VPN security service? Yeah, VPNs are good. Um, so if you do a search, I did it before. I used to know the top VPN services, but if you do a search on the web, just type in the top VPN um, services, and they will top 10 ranked VPN services. There are hosts of them, and you can subscribe to any one of those. But yes, I would recommend using a VPN. Uh, don't use public networks, such as McDonald's, Starbucks. Do not use public. Mhm. So that's where you would use your VPN. But of course, those networks are going to be downgraded. The bandwidth is low, so the video and so forth, services are not going to be high quality. So,
Indeed. We're probably going to in the near future do like a live hacking, introduction, a very basic hacking, show to get people's palettes,
oh yeah,
expand the palettes of our people, and so they know. And so again, we started, Black Science Month to encourage more people to get involved in the STEM fields, and or encourage their young people to get into the STEM field. So if we see more faces like us, in these various capacities, it would inspire a lot of African Americans and just Black African people across the world to get in it. And especially since we, if I understand the statistic correct, like less than 1% of PhDs, in these kind of hard science fields. And we need to be able to have those voices and be more inventive, and part of the process is
well,
introducing.
I have 10 of them. I have 10 PhD students I'm supervising, all African. Well, African and African American. 80% of them are U.S. They're African Americans.
All right. And that's what we need. And Morgan State is, of course, an HBCU and is doing great things. And so we'll have, Dr. Maat on the show. Possibly, your wife is also a PhD in the electrical engineering, correct?
Yes, that is correct. She's a Morgan. She's the first female PhD doctorate student from to graduate in electrical engineering from Morgan State.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but she was the
first. All right. Yes. So it's a lot of us doing big things, and I want to be one of those who highlights us and to encourage us to so send your children to Morgan State. Especially they have an interest.
Come get their PhD. So most of those 10 doctorate students started out with their bachelor's degrees, and they stayed on, worked their way from the bachelor's, master's, and they'll be getting their doctorate degree. So.
And what was your dissertation in, if I may ask?
It's funny. It was basically I automated the process of integrating the JTAG standard into chip designs. So the standard was just coming out. We had what they call a design automation system, one of the first of its kind, whereby we automated the design flow process. And my role was I automated the integration of the JTAG standard onto all of the chips. So I made the process automated that process for the designers. So I developed a tool, I built a system. So yeah, this stuff was way back. So I this was back at Berkeley, where I went to school. I got in electrical engineering and computer science. So I took a lot of EE and CS courses, so they have a lot of breadth. So, and that served me well even today. So.
Indeed. And we have Dr. Maat in the chat. So she says, peace to the panel. Again, our guest was the recommendation on this topic by Dr. Maat. And so I want to thank her again.
Yes.
And she has another comment. It's the real deal. I'm extremely appreciative to have him as a colleague.
Thank you, Doctor.
So, indeed. Um, so yes, but before we go, I just want to have a quick announcement, and that is the next shows. So this Friday, for those of you who are watching, we're going to change it up a little bit. And so we're going to have in Washa and Moncho, Edu out of Jersey. They are with the Acoma House Initiative. And so, you know, we deal with all things, kind of have a 360 education on this channel. So this is going to be dealing with the relationships and, you know, the role of relationships in terms of liberation and economic empowerment. And so they, you know, do consultations, relationship consultations, marriage consultations, and it is very culturally grounded. And this is a very dynamic duo. So they will be on the program this coming Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you don't want to miss that. And then on Tuesday, the 14th, I believe. Let me double check. I think it's the 14th. Next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yes, it's the 14th. We will have our good brother Robin Walker, who's a historian out of the UK, known for his book When We Ruled, which is in its second edition right now. And he'll be live from London. So for those of you who are watching from London, it will be 3 p.m. your time. So 10 a.m. our time on the East Coast, and 3 p.m. Eastern time, London time, UK time, overseas. So make sure that y'all are in the building for that. And this is what I'll do as well. There's going to be a conference on August 8th and 9th. It is the RBG. I'm going to share my screen. I meant to do this earlier. And so this is the trailer for the conference. It's only like 45 seconds. So it is going to be an online conference, and we're celebrating Marcus Garvey. And, you know, this is the 100-year anniversary of when the Pan-African flag was developed. So it's going to be a whole conference full of workshops and lectures by various scholars around the world, including Dr. Maat and myself. And so the workshop that I'm doing is Marcus Garvey and the importance of science to African liberation. And so this is the trailer. So hold on one second. If it will just
One
play.
weekend, 2 events, 70 speakers representing more than 60 organizations from 20 countries, 50 plus workshops. RBG Centennial Conference, a nation-building event like no other. There'll be vending, arts and culture, speakers, panels, virtual workshops, and more. It's all going down August 8th and 9th, 2020. Across all social media, use hashtag RBG100, RBGcentennial.com.
Drop the mantle of the red, the black, and the green around me.
So yes, that's the trailer, and there's a cost for the event. However, this week I will be giving away 5 tickets. So I'm gonna do 2 tickets tonight, and in order to get these tickets for the event, you have to send me an email. And the email is to add your email to my newsletter. And I don't send a whole bunch of newsletters. It may be once a month or once every other month. But so if you send an email to info@asarmhotep.com, which is this email here, and put in the subject matter, just put in the subject newsletter, and I will add you to the newsletter, and then I'm going to randomly select one. I'm going to select two winners later on tonight, and I will make known who it is that was chosen, and they will get 2 tickets. I'm going to give another one away tomorrow, but I'm going to do that via social media. And then when we have the edus on, I will give the last 2 tickets. So 2 tickets I'm giving away tonight, and 1 ticket I'm giving away tomorrow on Thursday. And then on Friday, I'll give away 2 more tickets to the online event. So again, if you want to get or, enter to win the tickets to the event, which is on August 8th and 9th, send me an email with the subject newsletter, and I will add you to the newsletter. And I'm going to select from there randomly and put your names in the hat, and I will select who wins, and I will let you know how you can obtain entry into the event. And so with that said, our guest does have a website where you can get more information about him and what he is doing. So I will put that and scroll at the bottom of the screen. Why is that both on there? Okay, there we go. It is iotcream.com. So y'all make sure that y'all visit that website. And what will they find on that website besides a bio of you?
They'll learn about some of the work that we do. There's some news feed about some of the highlights of some of our research. They learn about our research, or our sponsors, our faculty affiliates, our students affiliates. We call them CAP scholars, CAP faculty. They'll learn about just about what we do at Morgan, what we do, what kind of research we do.
Indeed. And as I said, prior, send your kids, encourage your kids to go to Morgan State in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm pretty sure they do tours. So if bring your children to the university and do a tour, and look for Dr. Kornegay and Dr. Ma'at, and let them talk to your young ones, and hopefully they'll decide. And it's ironic though, because like when way back in 97, 98, my first choice was to go to Morgan State University, and coming out of Texas. However, the out-of-state fees, and the scholarships that I had in state, it was like I gotta go there. But yeah, that was my number one school that I was going to attend back in the day. But yeah, if you have any closing words, I'll let you close it out.
Yes, for those of you with young children who exhibit any kind of genius for, who love to tinker, encourage them. My mother was great when I was young. I don't know, I guess she saw something in me, but she would always buy me some gadget, some erector set, and I had a microscope set. Back when I was coming up, we didn't have the web. We had the Britannica Encyclopedia. So she bought me a microscope. I spent the summer, instead of playing outside, I went out and was collecting samples, little bugs and things, and then referencing them in the encyclopedia, looking up their genus and species. So I was learning about, research and how to investigate and so forth. So I had that knack, that gift. So if you see these gifts in your children, encourage them along the way, do things and always encourage them and expose them to programs like Amar has, Asar has, and visit schools, and also with our one thing we've noticed, there's a shortage of women that's going in the STEM. We need more young ladies in STEM, so you need to get them with Dr. Mott and my wife, Dr. Kornegay, so that they need to see more of them. So I applaud you with what you're doing, what you all are doing. This is great, but we need more. We need a greater stage, because this is there's lots of opportunities. The cybersecurity workforce, they can't find enough. In the white schools, the predominantly white schools, they produce mostly, guess what? International students. And they can't get jobs in cyber. There's tremendous opportunity. One of my PhD students, he'll be graduating in December. He's got a job offers in excess of $140,000 coming out, fresh out of PhD, fresh out of school. So there's opportunity, for kids, because a lot of our kids like to stay local, stay in Maryland. So that's instead of going out west to Google, where we're not welcome out west. Anyway, so there's tremendous opportunity. So encourage your kids, inspire them, and fuel that fire. So thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate it, and thank you again, and thank you, Dr. Mott, and thank you all who are listening, live to the program, and of course those who are catching the archives. So, as usual, like the video, share the video. I'll be rebroadcasting this on the Black Science Month Facebook, channel. Facebook page, and we'll be getting some more scientists. And I'm a big science fanatic, and one of the reasons why I got into computer science is just attending for I don't know if you're familiar with the SIGGRAPH conferences. I went to one in high school, and it was in Los Angeles at the time. They're usually like in Orlando, Los Angeles, or in Tokyo, I think. That they at the time, those were the three that they would hop every other year. And when I walked in and I seen, what was, and this is back in the 90s, so imagine what's going on now. And I was like, I have to be a part of this, because I wasn't learning this stuff in school. So I had to wait until I got to college, to start that process. But, I just want to encourage everyone, especially a lot of people, kind of fall off because there's math involved. And, to not be afraid of math. So I would encourage y'all, don't be scared of math.
That's the key.
That's
the key, because really electrical engineering is applied math.
Yes.
The math and the physics are key.
Yeah.
And we have kids who, I mean, the average time is 6 years to finish their bachelor's, which is, but
It's like in architecture.
yeah, because it's because of the math. They have to take, because of the level of preparation, the lack of preparation in the high schools. So that you don't see the deficits until they come to Morgan and you're like, oh my God, these kids don't, they're like, so key to, they gotta have problem solving skills. You can't do reverse engineering if you don't have problem solving skills. If you can't connect the dots, you have to connect the dots.
Yeah.
This is a major problem with the generation, what do they call them? Z's or whatever. Because of the reliance on the technology, because they have so much information at their fingertips, they forget to use this channel. And so when you give them a real world problem and they have to sit down and figure it out and connect the dots, it's a challenge and it's scary. And this is something that I try to incorporate into my courses is critical thinking skills. So work on your kids' critical thinking skills. Because they're going to need that. They're going to need it, and it will carry them a long, long way. And so anyway, that's
the key. I would encourage parents as well to, at a very young age, get your children to learning a different foreign language and to play a musical instrument.
Oh man.
And the reason why I say that is because, like we're talking about mathematics, and mathematics in reality is a language. And, because we speak one language primarily here in the United States, it's hard for us to conceptualize thinking differently and thinking abstractly in another language. And so if you're used to speaking and having to think in another language, it makes it a little easier, and I noticed, I remember back in the day when I was into 3D modeling, and there's a software, 3D Studio Max. And so I purchased this book, to learn 3D Studio Max. So the creators of 3D Studio Max actually wrote this book. And so at the beginning of the book, they were talking about, how 3D Studio Max came into being. And, they were collaborating across the world. They weren't in a single, place. There was, collaborating across the world. But they said that the one thing that they noticed about every single one that was involved is that everyone had a knack for music and played a live musical instrument. And when I looked up, this thing with like geniuses and people who just have this knack, usually, they speak another foreign language, or they're into music.
That's fun.
Go ahead.
I studied music. So all through high school, I played the woodwinds and the piano. I was in the jazz band, and I studied music since middle school. I played all the way through high school. So it's interesting, and I, studied Spanish and Portuguese. Yeah. Two medical. Oh, that's wonderful, Mr. Evans. That's wonderful. So that's confirmation right there.
Yep. So you get them into that. It's just more so, and then of course it's patterns. That I'm more on the software end. And so that's all it is. It's patterns. And even when I do historical comparative linguistics, that's all we're looking for is the patterns. And
Exactly.
I think my computer science helps me to see things more in history and in linguistics than people who, you know, go to school directly and deal with it, because, you know, you're trained to look for these micro patterns and things, you know.
So even in reverse engineering,
Yeah.
what we're looking for are patterns.
Yeah,
Same thing. We're looking or listening for patterns.
exactly. But don't want to hold you up any longer. But
Okay.
I do appreciate you, and you know, hopefully we can have you back, and
Sure.
you know, for something, you know, more specific. But I wanted to introduce you to, you know, my audience and the STEM fields, and you know, kind of kick this off. And so remember, as well, for those who want to attend the online conference, and you know, you want some free tickets, because the tickets are $25, so you could save $25 if you you know, send me your email with the word newsletter, and I will close it out probably, I'll say what's on the West Coast, because I'm gonna do it 12 midnight West Coast, so it'll be 3 a.m. East Coast time. In terms of the United States, it'll be 12 a.m. On the West Coast, and I'll cut it off then, and then I'll choose and let everyone know in the morning. But thank you very much for coming on the program, and everyone else, I will see you on Friday. And so here's my contact information, and I will see everyone later. Peace.
Okay. Take it easy.